Okay, so welcome everybody to our session today. Thank you for joining us here in the business of the Faculty of Economics of Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv. Today will be the very interesting session for all of us. And now I'm happy to introduce our speaker, Michael Radin. Feel free to ask your questions during the session or in the end, here in chat or in live. And I guess now Michael will tell us what's next.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. I'd like to thank my colleagues, Oksana and Anastasia, for giving me a chance to present this. And I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to attend the seminar. And as Veronica mentioned, this is going to be a hands-on interactive seminar. Please stop at any time to ask questions. You don't necessarily need to wait until the very end. Okay, so let me share my screen. There we go. Okay. Since we're talking about startups, this is going to focus on creativity. So the question, how do we get started with our creative idea? In any startup or in anything, that's really the most critical and yet the most challenging part. How do we start an idea? Whether you're starting a homework assignment, whether you're starting work, starting class, that's really the most critical and yet the hardest part. Since we don't have a lot of time, let's outline what we're going to discover. First of all, what is creativity? How creativity naturally emerges, and motivations to be creative, and 7 reasons why feedback is crucial. How does it all of a sudden enter the picture in creativity? So I hope that would be one of the questions, because that doesn't seem to be connected at this point. Well, how do we actually start our initial draft or proposal of our creative idea? Because we can think of it, but eventually we're going to need to put that into writing, especially if we want to promote it or we want to get funding for it. And what is different and unique? So that's one of the things we need to focus. And why should someone buy it? So basically, your creative idea in a startup has to turn into a selling story. So why should someone buy your idea? You're basically going to sell your idea sooner or later. That's really the purpose of a startup. But that's only the beginning. There are many, many other steps ahead, even though it's the most critical and toughest step. However, that's only where the journey only starts. Okay, so I'm going to give you an opportunity before I define what is creativity. So somebody asks you, what is creativity or creative idea? How would you define it? So I'd like to hear your ideas. Any thoughts? Ivan?
First of all, I actually think that it is something disruptive that emerges and completely changes the market around it.
Aha. So introducing something totally new. So basically...
Not necessarily new, but maybe in addition to something that is already pre-existent.
Yep, that's exactly. That's a good start. So somebody else, please.
I guess it's also like the vision, the personal vision of somebody on something. Maybe it's already existent, but other vision outside of all previous that were presented.
That also I like, and I also agree, because I'm actually a firm believer in that. So not necessarily we're going to be, for example, Henry Ford, who's going to invent the engine, or Samuel Morse, who's going to invent the telegraph, but we're going to perfect and improve something that's already been invented. It's just like I personally call it the Japanese model, because the Japanese, they perfect technology that the Germans and Americans invent. So it's normal to not necessarily invent something new, but to perfect something that's already been invented. You're absolutely right. Okay. Any other thoughts? Well, before I actually give you what Wikipedia and Google thinks, actually, the word creativity comes from Latin. It's a Latin word. Does anybody maybe know what does that mean in Latin?
I guess no.
It means to make in Latin. So that's where the word creativity comes from. And even before Latin language existed, this idea has been around. The ancient Greeks, the ancient Chinese had this idea in mind, except that they also believed in making something and discovering something. That's what they viewed creativity, even though that word did not exist in ancient Greek and in ancient Chinese languages. Okay, well, very good points. So if you look up on Google, or you look up on Wikipedia, so there are quite a few definitions, but they all focus on originality and uniqueness, and also alternative ideas. So it's quite a bit of, you mentioned, well, we're not necessarily going to invent something new, but we're going to improve and alternate something that's already been existing. And also, we become creative to solve problems. So Samuel Morse, he didn't become creative in inventing the telegraph. He wanted to solve problems because it took days or weeks or sometimes months to communicate by regular post mail, where it took seconds instead. And if you look at other innovators like Samuel Morse, of course, they wanted to solve problems. That was their reason that their innovations came into existence. And of course, seldom are we going to be lucky that we're going to be creative where we do it easily in our comfort zone. That will, in fact, require a stepping outside the comfort zone, where we do need to take a little risk. Where in America, we often have the phrase, no risk, no reward, or there's no reward without a struggle. So in fact, have any of you heard those American phrases? So do you, of course, you have a right to say no, but do you agree with them?
Yeah, of course, sure.
Okay. All right. Before we proceed, maybe somebody else would like to add something to this? Okay. So as a mountain climber, so I do quite a bit of hiking. This is my normal comfort zone, where you have this is about 3,000 meter altitude in the Canadian Rockies. You have lots of trees. You don't have strong winds, severe weather. So that's my comfort zone. So the question, why would I want to take risks and climb to this altitude where we're looking at heavy winds, no trees to protect from the winds, avalanches, heavy snowfall? So why on earth would I want to do that?
Maybe to try yourself,
Mm-hmm.
if you can make it
Mm-hmm.
or not, or find something new I don't know, maybe new vision, new sites, new landscapes.
Well, Veronica, you're absolutely right. I would summarize it to discover new frontiers, a lot of ways. Now, as a photographer, don't you think that's a more scenic picture to take than to take this photograph? So that's one of the reasons I actually took the risk, so I can actually take this photograph, not only to discover the new alpine frontier and the alpine landscape, but also to take this photograph. Okay, now one way to look at the situation, if you follow your competitor's path, it's clear what's going on. It's a green path. However, when you start creating your own path, it becomes a red path because you are taking risks. And as we say in America, no risk, no reward, or no reward without a struggle. So the question, how do we design, why is this a red path? And how do we design this path? This is not going to be, it's not going to be a paved yellow brick road, as we say in America. It's going to be your own individual path that you're going to design. So you have to think, okay, how are you going to be different and how are you going to be better than your competitor? So as you mentioned, we're not going to be completely designing something new, but already improve or alternate something that has been already designed. So that's one of the things you need to think about as an innovator down the road. And towards the end of the presentation, we're actually going to discuss, which I'm hoping you're going to ask, well, what's the difference between creativity and innovation? That we will definitely discuss towards the end of the seminar for sure. Okay, now, how and why does creativity naturally emerge as we do that? So what would be the motivations to be creative? So some of you already started, so let's expand this list. So what are the motivations to be creative? And then we'll discuss how naturally it can emerge.
Maybe to further improve like certain life conditions, as you have said. So for instance, there is like you can say like edutech, like educational tools which can be improved. They're like I think anything can be improved for our ordinary life. It's to make our lives more comfortable, I think.
Improvement. So absolutely right. So that's really, I would say, the most fundamental part, because things can be good, but they're never perfect. Just like, for example, if you drive certain vehicles, Mercedes, BMWs, no, I mean, I've never owned them. I'm sure they're wonderful vehicles. However, I'm sure they have problems. They're not perfect. I'm usually happy with the outcomes of my courses I teach, but it's never perfect. Students always make recommendations. Okay, well, maybe you should think of this, maybe you should think of this. So there are always room for improvements and revisions. It's a never-ending process. There is a beginning and no end because it's a learning process of its own right. Okay, any other thoughts? What are the motivations to be creative?
Maybe to show your uniqueness, not to be just an ordinary person, but some new vision.
Exactly. I like that one. Okay, any other thoughts? Why should we be creative?
To add up to Veronica's answer, I think it's a way of like self-expression.
Okay, very good. Okay, any other thoughts? Okay, well, so as we could see, from my point of view, personally, we discover new frontiers and new adventures or new challenges. So as we discover new frontiers, of course, they become adventures because they do require some risk involved in that. So new adventures, new challenges And in a lot of ways, we do show uniqueness when we discover new frontiers, because not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody wants to take risks. So it does coincide with what quite a bit of you said. And of course, we accomplish new achievements when we do that. And also curiosity. I mean, we just get bored of doing the same thing, so we want to try something new, and we just like self-satisfaction. So that's why I put these in red, because I find them to be more critical. So these are, I would call the primary, and these I would call the secondary. Okay, maybe any of you like to add something to this? So speaking of revisions, improvements, so certainly this model can definitely be revised or improved. Any other thoughts? Okay, now, a lot of times they just naturally, creativity naturally appears whether you like it or not. And from my personal experience, they were not my ideas. They were ideas from colleagues. So tracing back my history, well, an editor from Walt's Scientific Publishing Company asked me, do I want to write a textbook? That was about 7 or 8 years ago. I said, well, that's just not, I don't think I'm meant to be an author. Well, she didn't take no for an answer. She said, well, I have faith in you. Let's get started. So she was not going to let me quit whether I wanted to or not. And I'm really grateful to her that she didn't give up on me, because now I've published quite a few textbooks with her company and other companies. Also, a colleague at a conference once asked me, Michael, how would you like to teach a risk management course? I'm like, well, I don't even know what risk management is. How am I going to teach such a course? Well, let's meet and we'll discuss it. And I asked her, do I have a choice? And she says, I don't think so. So it's good that, you know, I had colleagues who were not going to take no for an answer. And then a school principal at a pedagogical conference asked me, well, why don't you teach a course for high school kids in math? I'm like, okay, how do I possibly do that? Well, I figured out an idea, and then I wrote a textbook later about it. And very recently, the same editor who told me I don't have a choice to write this book basically told me, well, I really don't have a choice but to be an editor, because she liked how my style of writing books. Says, well, I think you can be a good editor where you're going to be training colleagues how to be authors. I'm like, okay, I think I'm ready for that. So I think this is a spectrum tracing history, how naturally creativity emerged. That wasn't my idea. Of course, I then expanded upon that. So as we talked about, okay, well, let's take somebody else's idea and alternate it and turn it into something different. That's exactly what I did later on. So before I continue, I'd like to give opportunities. Maybe you had similar experiences where you didn't want to be creative, but somebody suggested to be creative. Have any of you experienced that? Okay, Kirilo?
Yeah, I was actually involved in an educational project that was implemented in Kiev, and you know, I was just a regular coordinator that was responsible for involvement of internationals. But one of my colleagues that was responsible for the sales, she eventually left, and then and then like my boss said, okay, well then you have no team members per se, and so maybe we should give it to you, and then you can become a salesman, so to speak. And so this was basically the necessity to be creative, because I didn't know how to be a team leader, and after all, my subordinates, so to speak, they eventually became quite good. at selling, and I just understood that my creativity in delegation is pretty well. And so, sometimes you just need to try in order to understand if you're good at it or not. So that's what I see the creativity from practical experience.
Great. That's a really good story. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Anybody else would like to share a story similar?
I would say the only thing that I can come up is when I started to be an English tutor to kids. I was quite creative before that, but after I started working with different kids, I saw that just one plan for all kids don't work. So I have to be creative and to find the way to each of these kids to be special, and for them not to be bored and to like this subject that I'm teaching them. So this pushed me to be more creative, to find new ways of inventing something, finding something new, so that if I like it, I guess kids should like it too. And it really worked in some time. At first it was hard because I was used to work with just ordinary program of teaching, but then I saw that this creative studying is working better, and kids are learning faster than usual. So I saw how it changes.
That's a really great story. So what I'd like to actually summarize what you've done, you basically, based on what the story told me, you individualized each student's learning style. So you created, so instead of following the green path, so for each student, you designed his or her own individual learning path, which definitely is a red path, not a green path, if I understood you correctly. That's great. That's a really great story. Okay, anybody else would like to share a story? Okay, so this was this developed a fundamental base of my creativity, and then I used that base to design my own. So basically, my colleagues designed this path, but then they told me, okay, Michael, you have to design your own red path. You have to be innovative. So how did I continue with that? So I did transition to further ideas. Recently I wrote a textbook on international and multidisciplinary education, also with World Scientific Company. That was strictly my idea. It was not suggested. Well, we're going to talk about it later, because do you think I was given the green light the first time I wrote the proposal? What do you think? Take a guess, 50-50 chance. Do you think they gave me a green light to write the book the first time I designed that?
I guess no.
You're absolutely right. Second question, how many times did I get a red light before I got a green light? Take a guess.
Let's say 2 times.
Well, 5 times. So only on the 6th time they gave me a green light. Said, and the same thing. I just wrote a textbook about online education. I got also about 6 or 7 red lights before, and then currently I'm writing a textbook with a colleague from Jagiellonian University on management, diversity, and education. Being an editor, I already started guiding authors to writing books. So I'm Veronica in a lot of ways, as like you designed individualized learning path for each of your students. I'm like customizing individual learning paths for each of my author, what he or she has in mind that's unique. So you're also, Veronica, in your situation, I cannot have an idea that's going to work for everybody, because everybody comes up with different themes. So I give an overall scheme to all the authors. However, they have to individualize it from there, and I help them individualize it from there. And then also I designed and taught Introduction to Business Startups. I taught it with Yuri Bugay University in Kiev, and recently I had the opportunity to teach it at Jagiellonian University in Krakow. It was both times, it was a really great experience. What you may ask, well, what's the difference between Poland and Ukraine? Well, in Kiev, when I taught it, it was all Ukrainian students. However, when I taught it in Poland, it was an Erasmus program. So there were students from France, Germany, Italy. So it was a bit more challenging because you had much more diverse thinking in that respect, even though it was quite diverse when I taught it in Kiev, but it was much more multicultural in that respect, where there were much more contrasts in answers to specific questions. So this is how I transitioned and designed my own ideas based on the fundamental base. So basically, we need to have a base from which we're going to keep expanding, and that's how we're going to keep expanding our comfort zone. And let me ask you a question before we continue. Do you think it's possible to be creative or innovative within our comfort zone? So do you think that's possible, or do you think it's inevitable we have to step outside our comfort zone to be creative and innovative?
I don't know. I think all creative people are unique. They are not just ordinary, so they all step out of the way.
I personally believe that as well. Please, Ivan.
So I think it is about like the difference between growth of mindset and fixed mindset, because the people who can actually like overcome their fears and their worries about stepping away from their comfort zone, I think at the end of the day, these people gain a lot, even if they do not necessarily win, as you said with the example of green light and red light, they still gain lots of experience on their way.
Okay, well, that I like because in America, we actually seldom use the word failure. We use the word mistakes instead. So we keep trying each time, and we make revisions. So it's not a question, do we make mistakes? It's a question, do we learn from our mistakes? Everybody, if you think of these geniuses, Henry Ford, then Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, oh, they've made quite a lot of mistakes. Steve Jobs, oh, he made some really fatal mistakes. He was even fired from his own corporation once upon a time. So nobody, that's why all of these innovators, from my point of view, or creators, they definitely design their own red path. They don't follow anybody's green path. So I personally also believe that you have to step outside your comfort zone and take risks if you're going to be creative and innovative. Okay, so let me share some of my innovations. So that was one of my first textbooks that came out with World Scientific Publishing Company. Then after I taught a course for the high school kids in Brezhnev, Latvia, I decided to write a textbook on it because there was no textbook available. And then what motivated me to do that, and how did I convince the publishers to give me the green light for that? Because not only we as innovators take risks, but people who are going to be paying us money, they're taking even bigger risks, because if I mess up, that's going to cost them a lot of money for that. So we have to keep in mind that's also in their mind as well. So what are your chances of success, and how they're going to benefit and minimize the losses? Then I also wrote this book for the British company CRC Press, and then I worked with a lot of high school kids training to compete in Math Olympics. That's why I decided to write this book, which recently came out. And this is my most recent publication with World Scientific that came out. And this is actually my first non-math related book, because all the other books were math related. I just got bored of writing math books because I felt ordinary. I didn't feel unique anymore, where this was a much more bigger challenge than writing math, because I got a green light more or less to write a math book after the first or second time. But with this, it was only on the sixth time I got a green light. So that really expanded. Not only I had to step outside it, but really widened my comfort zone as well. So that I'm going to talk about later. What motivated me to write this, and how did I convince the publishers after the sixth attempt to let me write it, because there are quite many books on this topic, and why should they let me write this? So that we're going to talk about later, about uniqueness and being better than my competitors. Okay, and a lot of times creativity is not a choice. For instance, in American Mathematical Society, I used to attend these sessions, and all of a sudden organizers said, well, Michael, we're tired of organizing, it's your turn. And they said, well, if you don't organize it, the sessions are going to die out because nobody wants to do it. I'm like, okay, I mean, I wasn't really ready for it, but I mean, you learn quickly as time goes along, and I actually enjoy leading and asking the right questions, keeping the torch lit at sessions. So those were the fundamental skills I needed to learn. And how did I learn them? Because I've seen many previous sessions where organizers, if there were no questions, didn't ask questions, and it was like a really dead atmosphere, which I did not like at all. So those creative ideas, I corrected others' mistakes. Not only we have to learn from our own mistakes, but mistakes of others as well. Then I was serving in a graduate council at Rochester Institute of Technology. The chair stepped down, and nobody wanted to do it, and also I had no choice. But again, I corrected a lot of mistakes that the previous chairs have made. And teaching online courses 3 years ago when pandemic hit, that was not a choice to anybody. And honestly, I had no desire to teach online courses, and I liked it so much that I don't even want to go back to teaching in person, because that's where I've been teaching for almost 30 years. The 3 years that I've taught online really just boosted up my learning curve, where teaching in person was routine, and now I look at it as boring, and because you just can't solve a lot of problems you can solve in the online course. The speed of communication is just substantially fast. More foreign students take the class, and I can allow students to resubmit homework assignments as many times as they wish, where I couldn't do that in the traditional face-to-face class. I have students asking me questions I've never heard of before. So it really opened new doors and windows of opportunity. So in fact, have any of you heard the American expression also, you look at the situation, a glass of half empty or half full? Have any of you heard that expression?
Yeah, it's to
Don't
describe
think it's entirely.
if you are pessimist or optimist.
Exactly. Ivan, I'm sorry,
It's
what
not
did you...
entirely. It's not entirely American, I think, but it's a very common expression for many people. Yeah, as Carello said, it's about defining whether you're a more positive thinking person or if you're more on the negative side.
Exactly. So, well, I mean, I can't even count how many times I've heard that in America. So you're right. It may not be strictly American expression, but we do use that expression quite frequently in America. Okay, so let me give you opportunities. So maybe some of you had similar experiences where you didn't have a choice, where you had to do it, and then it opened new doors and windows of opportunities for you. Anybody have similar stories? Okay, so if you think of any, please don't hesitate. Okay, so as we mentioned, we become creative and innovative because there are problems we want to solve. And often these are not standard problems with standard solutions where we really have to think and be creative in order to solve them. Well, what problems am I currently experiencing that need more maintenance? Well, I'd like to make mathematics more accessible to students. That I feel is a bit of a problem in America. Also, with no question, international education in America is a problem. I feel that it needs to be more accessible to students, that more students should have opportunities and be exposed to international education. How do I answer questions more efficiently in online classes? This I'm working on right now, written communication. Students predominantly use chat to ask questions. Also, in between lectures, they ask questions by email. So even though I teach in synchronous mode, however, majority of the communication is in writing, not verbal communication. And how do I grade homework assignments faster in online courses? That I'm able to do literally within hours or minutes, where it took me a day or two to do in face-to-face classes. Students had to wait till the following class, where electronically you get the homework assignments back literally sometimes in a few minutes or no more than in a few hours. One problem that's going to be very, very challenging to solve in the online, which I don't have on this list, time zones. Because I can respond to someone's email very quickly, but if there's a 6 or 7 or 8 hour time difference, the other person may not read it for the next 3 or 4 hours. So that causes delays. So that's, I would say, the most challenging problem in the online environment. Okay. How do I encourage colleagues to become authors? And also, analytic approach versus geometric approach. So I'll show examples. That's one of the ways to attract more students into STEM disciplines, using portable technology instead of stationary technology, and digital form versus paper form. So this transition I've literally seen happening in front of my own eyes. Also, this transition I've seen in front of my own eyes, digitizing bureaucracy especially, is really beneficial, where it only takes minutes to fill out bureaucracy instead of taking days to fill it out, which we have in my institute recently. And certain methods just literally stop functioning. Like if can I use the teaching methods to teach students that my professors taught me 30 years ago? It would not be a good idea. I can, but they're just out of style and different generations. And most of my education was in the 20th century, and most of my teaching was in the 21st century. And it is quite a substantial contrast. And also, I got tired of buying traditional greetings cards and designed my own greetings cards. So let me show some examples how I made revisions. And of course, I hope you're going to share your experiences as well. So if you're reading a math book, wouldn't you rather see this picture instead of an analytic formula? So when I wrote my book on patterns, I said, well, this is, first, let's look at the system of squares, and that's where this formula comes from, where most of the books, they just write this formula and no pictures. You have no idea where it comes from. Similarly, like, instead of looking at this formula, adding odd integers, wouldn't you rather look at this pyramid instead, where you're looking at integers? So that's one of the ways I've actually convinced CRC Press, a British company, to give me the green light to write a book on patterns, because there are quite a lot of books out there. So that's one of the ways I've changed. I didn't change the content, but I changed the representation of the content. So that's going back to your comments that this is not original, but original representation of concepts. Okay, well, traditional birthday cards. Do I like dogs? Yeah, but I got tired of these cards. I decided to make it more personal and use my photographs and poems. Instead, I chose marine photographs. Women's Day. Do I like cookies and red flowers? Absolutely, but my female friends got tired of these cookies and flowers and said, Michael, why don't you be a little bit more creative? So what I decided, use sunset themes and photographs and poems to make it more personal. And Christmas and New Year's. Do I like candles, cookies, and trees? Yeah, but again, it got boring. I decided to use the Alpine theme for photographs and poems. And this particular photograph, this is the highest elevation I've reached above sea level, 4,200 meters in the Canadian Rockies. And also, first time I saw this, I could not believe it divides the flow of rivers in North America. So if you look on this side, rivers can only flow in the Pacific Ocean. The side I'm standing on, rivers can only flow in the Atlantic Ocean. I've seen it I've been there many times, but you never forget the first time you see such a place. So it did feel, it was challenging getting there, discovered new frontiers and satisfaction. So you never forget these. Okay, let's talk about feedback. So how does feedback connect to creativity? So any thoughts?
I guess if you give any feedback, whether it's good or bad, the one who created something that you gave feedback on understands that if he is doing right or not, if somebody catch his vision or not, and so he can improve or like find another way to make it better if it was not that good.
Okay, I agree with you. So feedback is definitely a fuel for revisions, because revisions are necessary whether we like it or not. Ivan.
So I think customer feedback is an essential part of CRM, of the CRM system. So if you build a valuable customer relationship system, and if you show your customers that you care, that you genuinely care about their opinion, and you work at your various mistakes if you have some, and that you listen to your customer, that is, of course, a great thing.
Well, listening, I agree with you, is really critical because it's important to communicate. It's important to listen to somebody's, whether you agree with them or not, it's still important to listen because you establish trust. So that's definitely a critical trait of feedback. I totally agree with you. Okay, any other thoughts? Well, let's see what Lucian Kiershak has to say. Well, whether you can have a really good product, it's never perfect. There's always room for improvement. Just like we mentioned, Mercedes, BMWs, Volvos, I'm sure they're great vehicles, but there are problems with them. They definitely need improvement. It's important to have the customer involved because he or she is going to see things you're not necessarily going to see, because students see details I may not necessarily see. I've been teaching for 30 years. That happens quite frequently. And in fact, when students catch me on mistakes in lectures or notes or anything, any mistake that they detect, they get 5 bonus points on their following exam. So I encourage them to actually provide me that type of feedback. It generates recommendations. It invites customers back. Well, he says even bad feedback can be used to sell the product. Well, I don't actually believe there's bad feedback. It's a question whether we agree with it or not, or because we may not, it may be good feedback, we may not understand it. So it's not my phrasing, it's his phrasing. So I would say it's agreeing and understanding feedback. And you gain new customers and you establish trust and loyalty with customers. So basically it creates an amiable and trustworthy atmosphere. Okay, any other comments on feedback? Would you like to add something that's not on this list? So feedback certainly has been one of the most critical tools in being creative, because as I mentioned, 80% of my creative ideas were not my ideas. They were actually recommendations from colleagues to write textbooks, to organize sessions, to produce greetings cards. So these were not, I enhanced somebody else's ideas and designed my individualized path from there. Okay, well, eventually we're going to need to put that in writing. So we can create, we can think of ideas, but we're going to need to communicate in writing, because seldom, so we're going to talk to somebody, especially when we have international communication, it's done in writing, not in not verbally. So you're going to have to convince somebody in writing, why is your idea good, and why should they buy it. So when you try to sell your idea, so these are the things we need to think about. How many products already exist? What are the problems with them? How is it different? How is it better? Who your clients are going to be and how will they benefit? So anybody like to add something to the list that's not there? So speaking of feedback, if you feel that you disagree with this list or you'd like to add something to this list, please, I insist that you do, because that's a part of the seminar. Okay, so personally, that's from my experience. So for instance, why did CRC Press give me the green light to write this book? Of course, there are other books on recognition of patterns. So, Kirill, please.
Yeah, actually, it's regarding the previous slide of what would be benefits of a unique idea. You know, it might sound a bit greedy, but what would be benefit from the investors? Like in your case with editors, what would be their profit? What would be their benefit if they published your book under your name with the contents that you wanted in that book? So what would they gain from it? That's also kind of the factor that also really depends on how your product would be unique and successful in ways that how the investors would promote it and eventually, you know, put even more money into developing it.
Well, this is actually a good point, because it's certainly a two-way street in this case, because when they give me the green light to write this book, because they're also promoting themselves, that because they're competing, because you see, I'm competing with other authors as an author, but CRC Press is competing with other publishers. So they want to produce books that other publishers are not producing. That's actually one of the reasons they gave me a green light to write this book, because none of the other publishers had anything in mind, because they also want to be unique and different compared to their competitors. That's why they would invest money into that, because they pay me money to write the book, and also they want to earn money from the sales. So it's not to their benefit to let me write a book from which they're not going to make a lot of sales. And also, they want to be innovators themselves. I said, oh, okay, well, we have authors who are writing these books where our competitors are not writing. When they go to conferences, that's exactly what they're going to do. And I can tell you that because I'm actually an author and an editor at this point, where as an editor, I'm getting authors to write books where certainly competitive publishers are not going to allow them, or may not actually have resources to do. So I'm glad you actually asked this question. It's certainly a very important two-way street, because as an author, you want to promote yourself into writing new ideas that nobody's, but also as a publisher, they want to get several authors to come up with new ideas that their competitors don't make. So it's really a two-way competition, because authors compete with authors and publishers compete with publishers. So I'm glad you asked. So did I answer your question properly?
Yeah, I believe so. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what is different about this book? So why did CRC Press gave me a green light quickly to do this? So I had to answer questions. How many similar textbooks are there? What are the problems with those books? What is different about my book? How's my book better? And how is the audience and the publishers are going to benefit from this? Okay, well, competitive textbooks, they were very narrowly focused. So basically, in order to read this textbooks, you need to already have, for instance, a bachelor's or master's degree in computer science, in electrical engineering, because they focused on signal processing, or on programming, or in machine learning, or statistical. So these books are not accessible for high school students. They're certainly not accessible to lower level undergraduate, where mine, we start from scratch and we look at the geometrical approach to patterns, and then we transition from very elementary to more open-ended questions, where these already start with very challenging open-ended questions where you need to have a lot of knowledge. Am I competing with them? No, because I want the students who read my book to actually be able to understand these books. So in a lot of ways, it's like it prepares them to read these other textbooks there. So in a lot of ways, I'm collaborating, not so much competing with them. And then, of course, key patterns. So what is going to catch the eye of the publishers and people who are going to buy the book? Also, they're going to look at this. And also, it's gateway to studying more advanced mathematics, and start with a geometrical approach and then transition to analytical approach. So where patterns naturally emerge, not artificially creating patterns as you see in other textbooks. Okay, now there are many other books on international education, and 6 times I got a red light before I got a green light. So it was quite competitive. But what do you think was the catch? Why eventually World Scientific agreed to let me write the book? So what do you think was different about this book compared to the existing ones that existed?
Maybe you provided some, fresh ideas on this topic compared to the competitors.
Absolutely. So not only they're fresh, but they're practical, because I actually wrote it from my experiences in teaching overseas, since I've taught in Greece, in Latvia, Ukraine, and Poland. So this is where I rendered these experiences, and I compared them relative to the American system, and how do you actually design new ideas, how do you create new ideas in a different academic system, which is quite different than teaching in your own academic system. So I did write a lot of these. And also, after reading quite a few books on international education, a lot of authors wrote books on international education when they never actually traveled overseas, which I found a bit to be silly. That was the primary catch how I got World Scientific to let me write the book. I convinced them, okay, well, the competitors, they're writing textbooks based on statistics when they've never, not based on experiences. That was really the fundamental catch of how I convinced CRC, World Scientific, to let me publish this book. So more or less similar story, how I gave hands-on experiences, how to design courses and seminars overseas, how to make revisions, how to modify, because I can teach a course successfully in the American system, then I introduce it to Ukrainian system. There are going to be revisions that need to be made, and sometimes I have to design a totally new course because it's not compatible with the Ukrainian system. Same follows with Greek, Latvian, and Polish system. Sometimes I had to design a completely new course because these ideas were not compatible. It was not a question that I have to make revisions. It was a question that I have to design a completely new course or not. And again, I looked at who competitors were, how am I different and better than them, and 6 key features. And then we want to concentrate on paving our own individualized, designing our own individualized path, how Veronica mentioned how she designed an individualized path for her students. So how is it different than competitor's path? What are the problems with the competitor's path? We want to make it more scenic, and what are the advantages? So again, our red path, a lot of ways, is going to be parallel to the green path, but we want it to be more scenic. We want it to be better. So why do we want to convince somebody, okay, well, design your own path instead of walking on the existing path that already exists? So there are a lot of benefits and advantages to that. As mentioned, this is where the story only starts. However, it's the most critical part. So designing the idea, convincing somebody, selling your idea. But this is where we actually transition from creativity to innovations. So in fact, I promised we're going to discuss this. Can someone tell me the difference between creativity and innovation? Okay, Ivan, let's start off with you, then Kirilo, we'll go to you. Mm-hmm.
So do you think that innovation is more of like the outcome of creativity? So innovation is the next process after creativity. It's what we come to.
Exactly. So it's an outcome. Okay, Kirilo.
Well, I would describe innovation as more of a more practical, more better adaptation of the original stuff, which was the part of the creativity. So basically, innovation is more like like Ivan said, the end point of creativity. Like if you want something to be good, practical, successful, creativity is not enough. There also needs to be innovation at some point.
I agree. Okay, any other thoughts of what would be the difference between creativity and innovation? Okay, so to summarize what Ivan and Kirilo said, basically we're looking at outcomes, and it has to be more practical. Creativity is just brainstorming where innovations we're actually implementing and putting into the practice. So that's, if you look up on Google or in Wikipedia, that's how they really distinguish the difference between creativity and innovation. Okay, well, we need resources for implementation. Well, that's going to require certain leadership for us to do that, and which specific categories of leadership, and also stepping outside our comfort zone. That addresses emotional intelligence. Also, we discussed risk. Well, it's not a question, do we take risk? How do we minimize the risk? And we want to be flexible and listen to feedback and expand our creative ideas. And we need to understand our competitors and stay ahead of our competitors. That's why we have our red path is parallel to the green path, because we want to be ahead of them, because if we start going too far away from them, then we stop understanding what they're doing. So we always want to at least keep up with them, and even better to stay ahead of them. Well, for me also, I have many other ideas to think about. Well, I just finished writing a book on designing an innovative online teaching and learning environment with my colleague from Poland, from Jagiellonian University. We're writing a book on management, diversity, and education. And then also, since I've taught a course in business startups, I decided to also write a book about it. And I'm in the process of getting closer and closer to getting a green light to write it. So I still have a couple of revisions to make. So this, we already received a green light. So shortly, the light should turn from red into green. And of course, making university level mathematics accessible to high school students, and not mentioning also series editor for World Scientific, making international multidisciplinary accessible, developing more coalitions, and preserving the two-directional communication in the online environment. Okay, and before we quit, so these are a lot of times expressions we use in America, whether they're American or not, I'm not sure. No reward without a struggle, no risk, no reward. Often my American friends will say life is an adventure, not a guided tour. Better to have tried and failed than not have tried at all. One step at a time. Also, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You win a battle, you lose a war. A relative no, no is a relative no, not an absolute no. Learning from mistakes instead of repeating mistakes. You got one bullet, you've got to make the shot. Better late than never. This we discussed. Glass is half empty, not half full. One door closes, the other opens, and be the best of the best. If you ever seen the movie Top Gun, often that's where the first time I ever heard that expression. Of course, I've heard it many times afterwards, but that's the first time I heard that expression. And last but not least, share the quote from James Cook: not only go further than anyone has gone before, but as far possible for man to go. So I think this is a good time to stop here, and I hope you have more questions and comments. And also, I hope our communication is only going to start. So please email me, and on my American phone, I have WhatsApp. You can call me on my American phone as well. When I'm going to be in Europe in May, you can call me on my European phone. I also have WhatsApp. So I hope that this is only the start.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, if you have questions, you can ask now.
Okay, Ivan.
So first, thanks a lot for your lovely presentation. I wanted to ask you whether it is one of many events that you will be hosting in Dia Business. That's my first question.
Well, I hope so as well. So I would definitely like to continue. So I will definitely talk to Oksana and Anastasia. I hope to continue the collaborations as well, certainly. So in fact, let me I'm going to send everyone my contacts through chats. Okay, just give me one moment. Okay, so I sent my business cards through, so that has my email, that has my American cellular, European cellular, so I have WhatsApp on both of them, so please, and you can also find me on Facebook, LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, you can find the textbooks posted, so certainly I'd like to continue is enhancing the collaboration. So this is where we're going to be innovators, where we're going to be implementing it.
Okay, that's very great to hear. And also a more specific question coming on the way. I know that it's not really related to the following presentation. What do you think, what software would you recommend to write a business plan?
I often write it in Word. So that would be because all these examples I've showed you, I wrote them in Word because it has easy navigations. It keeps tracking for you. To be more precise, if you know how to use the program LaTeX, because all my textbooks I write in the program LaTeX, which I've used for almost 30 years at this point, like, the table of contents, that has automatic numbering in it, even better than Word does. So I would start out with Word, but then if you know how to use LaTeX, that's even better. So it's pretty much DOS grammar. So I can teach you how to use it. It's very easy program to use, and you don't need a license. They have free versions of it.
Okay, thanks for your answers.
And please, if you have more, please email me, and I'll be happy to give you other recommendations and resources.
Okay, any more questions? I guess no. So thank you, Michael, again. It was very interesting. And now I would like to ask you and everybody, if you have an access to your camera, we have a tradition here to make the group photo now online at the end of all lectures. So if you have a possibility to turn on camera, please do, and we'll have this photo. Yeah, I guess I have some photos now. Thank you so much.
Is there a way you can send me that by email, and also if possible, can I post it on Facebook and LinkedIn? Great.
Yeah, I guess the girls who contacted you will send you.
Oh, great.
I will share with them, and you can also see them on our Dear Business Instagram, Facebook, I guess, as well. We'll share it too.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity, and we say till next time.
Yeah, thank you. Hope See you